All right. Welcome everybody back. We have not been together since October 4th. Welcome to the New York Giants Preservation Society meeting tonight. Great guest tonight, who is the beat writer for the Giants for KNBR.com. We'll get to Danny Emerman in a second. Just want to go over some things that have been transpiring. We lost one of our members this week, Arnold Hano. His son Steven is in the group and always emailing me and stuff. But he wrote so many great books on baseball, A Day in the Bleachers, and he lived to be 99. So I think a lot of you would take that. So
I'd sign up for it.
Yeah. Also, for the people in New York, one of our other members is retiring, and I'd like to get him on here in the near future. Steve Summers from WFAN. He wrote me a beautiful email the other day.
Wow.
Said, actually before I even read it in the New York Post, that he was retiring. So I'm not going to bother him, but in the future, I had in the past, I had spoken to him about coming on here, and he said he would. He just never had time. So hopefully he'll have the time, because he is just an entertainer par excellence. I mean, he doesn't try to be anything he's not. He's a normal guy who's just very, very funny, and he's got that whole Bay Area background because he worked in San Francisco, in the 80s. Before he joined WFAN here in New York, where he's been on the air since 1987. So we'll look forward to that. Either next week or the week after, we're having Professor Adrian Borgos, who is a professor in Chicago, Champaign, and he writes about Latino baseball. And this is one of his books, Playing America's Game. He'll be talking about Marichal and Cepeda, and his other book is called Cuban Star, where he talks about Alex Pompez, who is a Hall of Famer who worked for Horace Stoneham, and was owner of the Harlem Cuban Giants. I think the Cuban Giants. He knows everything about this subject area. So I'm waiting. It's either going to be on the 11th or next week. And then in the future, we have Corey Bush, who's going to be coming on. He was Bob Lurie's right-hand man in San Francisco when Stoneham signed the team, and then also when they were going to be leaving San Francisco. And we're also going to have, hopefully, a tour of the Gotham Club, a live event there where they'll go around and show us the artifacts in there and things like that. But tonight we have a special night. We have Danny Emerman, who was lucky enough to join the Giants during this epic season. He's going to give us a little background of himself and talk about the season, what's going to be transpiring, and then it's going to be a Q&A. And again, if you read that piece I sent out, he just graduated from Syracuse. I don't know about him or you guys, but if I was to define this season, how I feel right now, it's a great season, but it was very exhausting. It just felt like every night there was somebody on our tail and just wouldn't shake it. And unfortunately, they shook it the last game on questionable calls, but it is what it is. It was a great season, nothing to be ashamed of. It was just a fabulous season, and it kept our interest for 6 months, which you could have never envisioned. And they had a great season. And to tell us more about that, Danny, this is the New York Giants Preservation Society, and as you can see, many of the people are still huge San Francisco fans who just never lost their desire to follow the Giants. So everybody give a nice round of applause, Danny Emerman. Danny, the floor
Thank you
is
so
yours.
much. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's really cool that you guys have this group and it's so active. And I think it's a really commendable thing, and I'm glad that you've all, found each other to talk about the Giants, and I think that's cool. And I appreciate all of you following along with my coverage and with all the coverage elsewhere on the West Coast, which I know it can be hard. I know it can be hard to stay up late on the East Coast and watch the games, and so I get it, and I appreciate it. I know a few of you. I've talked to some of you for stories and otherwise in the past, so it's great to see you in person. Great to see the face behind the name. So a little bit about me. I just graduated from Syracuse in May. I'm actually heading back up to campus tomorrow for a little bit of a reunion, which I'm pumped about. And I joined the Giants beat for KNBR.com in mid-August. And I think Gary said, I was lucky enough to do it. And I completely wholeheartedly agree that I was so lucky to get that job, so lucky to be in the Bay, so lucky to be on that specific beat. I was applying to beat jobs all over the country, all different sports. I had a lead in Alabama to cover some college sports down there. I think San Francisco is a much better fit for me than Alabama. I'm from Boston originally, and I've lived in the East Coast all my life. So the Bay is similar in a lot of ways. So I think it's a great fit, and it's an awesome job. And I do feel lucky, to have it every day, which is awesome. And Gary mentioned how exhausting the season was, and I also think that's a nice adjective to describe it. I think it was exhausting for me, yes, but it's not about me. It's about, the players, and they were definitely running on fumes at the end. You can tell just talking to them every day. And I think that's a tough thing to grasp from the outside, is just how much of a grind the 162 game season is. And some guys feel like they're not, allowed to really talk about it because whatever, they get paid millions of dollars to play a game, and they feel like nobody wants to hear them complain. And I mean, that's valiant in a way, but I really do recognize that these guys have a hard job, and they're away from their families all the time, all summer. They're working every day. They don't get days off. It's grueling on their bodies. They're all playing through injuries that nobody knows about. I wrote a story about the Buster Posey's, load management things, because he's so old and they didn't have him playing every day. So I learned a little bit about all the work that goes into getting him ready for games, and all the training staff and, treatment he has to do. And it's a full-time job plus 10 hours basically. So it was definitely an exhausting season for the players and for the coaches. So it was also a lot of fun. They played playoff games from basically September 1 on. Every single game felt like a playoff game. And that was really exhilarating to cover. And I'm sure it was really fun to watch as a fan. And it definitely was fun for the players to play. That's what they all said, this is the most fun time of the year. And it's what, they all lace up to play for. It's to have meaningful games and to be playing important games at the end of the year. And most people didn't think that would be the case with the Giants this year, and it totally was, which was awesome to follow. And I think they are building, sustainable foundation for the future too, which we can talk about. And if you guys have questions about that, I'm happy to answer.
First of all, Danny, again, thanks for coming on. We've had other beat writers on, Alex Pavlovich and Chris Haft and Andrew Baggerly, and you fit right in with them. And really, we wish you the longest longevity you want there, and best of luck. So I'll start off with a quick question. First of all, I think there usually are more members in here. I think we haven't met in 3 weeks, and I don't know if they're baseballed out, but again, cannot thank you enough. But I'm going to lead off with one question. I feel that Farhan has done an incredible job. I actually wasn't sure when they hired him, and now I am truly a believer. That being said, Gabe Kapler, when he was with the Phillies, I think most people considered him a doofus. He did not know how to handle the pitching staff, the bullpen, horrible. Everything he did this year basically turned to gold. Should we be as confident as him as we are with Farhan? Or what are your views?
I think that's a great question, and it's a great place to start too. And yeah, I mean, in Philadelphia, he was a disaster, and his relationship with Farhan that went back to LA is kind of the only reason that he's a manager. Like, I don't think any other team would have hired him that year. Probably not the next year either. Maybe he would have gotten a second chance at some point. But I think that relationship he has with Farhan is why he's still a manager, and it's why it's worked out. And he's changed philosophically, I think, a lot since Philadelphia. He's talked pretty openly about that to reporters in the dugout and to on Zoom and to the press in general. But I think in Philadelphia, he really wanted to reinvent the wheel and be very aggressive with, reliever decisions and with pinch hitting situations, which he still is. So I think part of it is having a better team to manage. But now he kind of has done a 180 where he kind of says to everything that he's not reinventing the wheel. He says every good team manages the exact same way. So I think he's studied the way baseball is headed, and I think he's definitely made adjustments to his strategy. And I think his biggest strength as a manager is the way that he can be the leading voice in the clubhouse. I do think the players respond to him. I do think he is an even-keeled guy. He's a guy who's been in a lot of big games as a player, which I think helps resonate with them. He's really bright and thoughtful, and he explains his decisions well to the players. And I think one thing where you're going to manage the way he did with so many call-ups and options every single day, they're going to get a new guy from Sacramento. You have to have a lot of tough decisions. It's pretty much every day. And he told us, it's not a fun part of his job, but it's an important thing that he needs to do. And he's taken a lot of pride in doing it right. And I think things like that go a long way.
So believe in him is what you're saying.
I'd say so.
Okay.
I think he's doing it right with a lot of those things in terms of, being a voice people respect in clubhouse and making smart moves. Like, winning helps. And if they start losing, it's going to, look a lot worse, and people might not respond to him as much. But I think they have enough talent to keep winning, and that will help and make him look like a good manager.
Thanks so much. We'll go to Steve and then Mars.
Steve Rothschild here. We spoke on the phone a while back. You have a very nice presentation for a young gentleman. I'm going to a different angle here. Like Gary said, we don't have as many people as we usually have tonight, but this group is pretty well stocked with giant personnel. For example, the granddaughter of Horace Stoneham, Jamie Rupert, is one of us. The last New York Giant bat boy, Ed Logan, is part of this group. Rick Swig, I'm not sure you know that name. If you don't, Gary will explain. And we've had Larry Baer on here. We've had John Miller. I mean, Gary's done a tremendous job. The topic I'm concerned with, and a lot of the people here are, because we all grew up with Say Hey, we would like that stadium to be called Willie Mays Stadium at Oracle Park, in any combination of those words.
Willie Mays Field. Willie Mays Field.
Willie Mays Field at Oracle Park, any combination of that. So what would we, you have our back, all of us. I don't know if this is something you would consider maybe trying to push a little bit. Larry Baer knows our feelings. They all do. And, Ricky Henderson Field is across the way in Oakland.
Right.
It's just a topic. And like I said, you have our back. We would all help if necessary. And we'd like to see it happen. So I'm leaving you with that thought.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. Next time I see Larry, I'll mention it to him. When you had him on, did you ask him about it?
Oh, yeah.
What did he say? What was his response?
Back then, Danny, with COVID, they were more concerned, and rightfully so, about getting people at the park because nobody was there, getting workers home, and staying ahead of the Dodgers. So even though the issue was, would have been nice because it was his 90th birthday, it was just too short notice with COVID, and that's totally understandable. So,
But he did say after the season, that was part of the conversation, that they would look into it. So, I don't know where that goes. And by the way, the buses started running again during the playoffs. We had no issues at all getting back to the hotel. So they did start running again until 1 o'clock.
and Danny,
Anyways.
I don't think it's a New York thing. Norm, you're out there. You've been there forever. I'm sure you would agree that most San Franciscans would agree with that sentiment, correct?
Well, I think it would go over big, yes.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea personally. And I hope that they can do something like that, something like that in time where he can, see it and enjoy it.
You're missing the point. We need you to take the lead now. Spoke to the
You
New
think
York
I
Giants
have the
Preservation
agency?
Society.
I don't think I have much power.
You have
in
just
this
become the
situation.
man right now. You're wearing number 24 on your back.
Danny,
You guys
that's
are the
a,
ones with Larry's ear.
Danny, that's a New York City public school teacher addressing you so there's nothing more enraged than a New York City public school teacher that wants the Oracle Park dedicated to Willie Mays. Believe me. Right, Steve?
Absolutely.
There you go.
All right, Mars, go ahead.
Well, before I get to my question, I want to expand on those thoughts about Willie Mays Field. At the time, I know there were bigger issues with COVID-19 and the buses and the only 20% capacity. But Larry Bird did say something that was kind of like negative, where he said, well, we have the street named after him and we got the plaza named after him. Well, you could always call it M&M Plaza. And just, if it's Ricky Henderson Field at Harris Casino, it's still Ricky Henderson Field, and of course, Willie Mays is due a lot more than, in my mind, probably a lot of others than Ricky Henderson, well, especially for Giant fans. But here's my question. We've seen a revolution in baseball where it's become a bullpen game, where especially managers that lead the way in this, which is Dave Roberts, takes out a guy throwing a no-hitter. Other managers have done that before, going into the ninth inning. Takes out a guy giving up only one hit. If one batter gets a walk or a double, that pitcher who's thrown 4 innings is out. When you look at Marichal and Spahn 16-inning games, or Hubble and Tex Carlton in 1933, where Hubble pitched an 18-inning no-walk shutout, and Tex Carlton went 15 innings. How do you feel about this bullpen game?
I think that's a great question. Great question. And I would honestly be more curious to learn more about what you guys think, but I'm happy to share my thoughts. First, I'd say that I think more than Dave Roberts, I think Tampa Bay and Kevin Cash is probably more responsible for the rising popularity of it. And they've had so much success with it. Like you can't knock it, especially with, them having so much success with a lack of payroll. And that's a big reason why, is because they don't really spend that much money on, big starting pitching arms in free agency where they can just bullpen game a lot. I think it's really smart. It's a market inefficiency that is the type of thing that every good baseball team looks for to try to win more games. Do I think it's good for the game? No, definitely not. I think more than bullpen games themselves, I think the pace of play is, just becoming a joke. And there are going to be real conversations about a pitch clock being instituted. And I would personally be for it. One of the Giants coaches I was talking to, he would also be for it. And like Giants coaches, I'll say this now and I'll say it again. Everyone on the Giants and all their coaches and managers, they know so much more than me about baseball, and their word's not gospel, but it carries much more weight than anything I say. So if one of the coaches on staff is in favor of it, then I think that speaks volumes. And I think part of why it could work is because they use the pitch clock in the minor leagues. So at some point in the next 3, 4, 5 years, every single major leaguer will have been exposed to it. So they'll have, prior exposure to it, they'll be used to it. And it won't be like this crazy radical shift. And the results have been great in minor leagues. There's more balls in play. The games are like 20 minutes shorter. There's less strikeouts. So there's more action. It seems like that's a great fix. So hopefully that will be instituted at some point. As for, sorry, I got a little bit sidetracked, but bullpen games, I still think the best way to win is to have a really dominant starter. I mean, you see it in the World Series now. It's hard to patch up innings when your starter breaks his leg and only goes 2 innings, but you can still do it. And one of the reasons they can still do it is because they have 3 more starters lined up where they're comfortable using so many of their bullpen guys. So bullpen games, I don't think they're going anywhere because they've been proven to be successful, but I still don't think they're the best way to win baseball games and win championships.
Looks like it wore Max Scherzer out.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bill Klink, go ahead. We're going to go Bill Klink,
Yes.
Vogel, Harvey, and then Bill Schiffner.
Yeah. Danny, thank you very much. Congratulations on graduating from Syracuse, a wonderful journalism and media school, probably one of the 2 or 3 best in America. You already knew that, so that's why you went there. To my question, really piggyback on Steve's on this. Yes, we have been beating the drum, excuse the term, for a renaming or an additional name to the park. Oracle has their feelings on that, and maybe it gets in their way. But one thing that wouldn't is something we're going to see starting tomorrow night, live and in color, and it's going to be huge. When we look out past the second baseman, we're going to see that big number 44 emblazoned all over the outfield. It's a shame that they're the park that did it first. We need to, I really think this is something that's doable for the Giants. But if we want to do the big 2-4 out there, why not in the inset of first base, just on the grass part in front of the first baseman there? Obviously, it's going to be a lot smaller. Put a 44, our own 44. Gosh, I'll tell you, that would be it would be iconic in baseball. And, anything the Giants can do that's good and iconic, well, you got about 50 people here that'll be behind that. Maybe you could speak to that. And I do have a kind of a side odd question, but, I do give side odd questions. Gary knows that. I've been watching the World Series and I see Dusty Baker. Why is he wearing batting gloves? Kind of
His hands are cold.
His hand, I don't know what's with the gloves. I've seen everything. Managers wearing gloves. I don't know. Maybe you have an answer. You probably don't, but food for thought. But the 44 and the 24. What are your thoughts? Is that something that's sellable to the Giants?
Yeah. No, there's a lot to work with there, but. Gloves, I think somebody said it. I think he's probably just cold.
He's cold.
Do you guys remember Dusty's son for the 3 championships when he was, the bat boy?
Yeah,
Not 3
Darren.
championships, but early on, like in 02. He's I think 23 now. He's in the minors, which is so cool.
Yeah.
So sorry, for 44 and 24, I think those are both great ideas. Oracle Park is amazing. I like it a lot. Great ballpark. But there's something kind of lacking. It's kind of sterile a little bit, maybe. I don't know. I grew up in Fenway Park, which is very much like the opposite. It's rusty and old and endearing in that way. maybe Oracle Park is just too shiny and new, but something like that I think could give it a nice touch of history, which is something that, like I said, I think it's lacking a little bit. And so much of baseball is about history, which is what
It's
something
in
I
your
love about
face.
baseball.
I mean, every time you see the Giants, you're seeing the 24 and the 44.
Yeah,
It's a
great
constant reminder of our history.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Going number 27.
Well, I guess we could put it on the mound, and I'm a Marichal fan as big as anyone, but I think we can overdo it maybe a little bit on that. Maybe.
Paul, go ahead, Paul.
Okay, hold on a sec. Yeah, I'm muted. Hold on.
You're good.
You're
Oh,
good. We
okay,
can hear you.
thanks. Yeah, Danny, hey, nice to see you. I grew up in Western Massachusetts, so I'm a Red Sox fan too, as well as a Giant fan. Willie Mays is my idol as a kid, which is why I became a Giant fan. But the question I had, there was a great article in the New York Sunday, in the Daily News on Sunday by Bill Madden, who's been writing about baseball for years, and he had a great comment about umpires. He said all the umpires get rated, but somehow when the playoffs come, their rating doesn't mean anything when it comes to giving them games. And so I know we've seen some horrific calls. Isn't there a way, I know they do that in college basketball, that only the really good officials with a proven track record get to cover those games? Has there been any thought to putting in some sort of a rating system that's effective during the playoffs?
I think that's a great question. And it's something that obviously is pertinent to this Giants season. I mean, the officiating was a disaster all series, not just the last game. It was bad, like real bad. And usually it was bad both ways, but at the end of the day, like you're going to remember the tough calls that went against you when it mattered. I think to answer your question, there are discussions about it. And I think it's going to be discussed this winter during the CBA negotiations.
Right, yeah.
As it should be. I think one of the reasons why you see some of the terrible umps in playoffs is because they're unionized. And I think they have an agreement that they get to work. And I think there would be some sort of litigation if they weren't allowed to work. So I think some of the guys like Angel and Joe West, Joe West's actually been pretty good. I really had a problem with him, but some of the Giants guys, they were put on, a wild card game, and then they wouldn't have to work again. Maybe they do a wild card game and then NLDS and they're done, or just NLDS and they're done. So it's a confusing, kind of complicated system that I don't fully understand, but it definitely needs some reforming. And like you said, they are rated. Like if you follow them on Twitter, like there's the ump scorecards after every game, and you can see how well they did in the strike zone and the 3 worst calls of the game. And that's data that the league should look at and help make the game better, until we get robot umps, of course.
Thanks.
Harvey,
Dan.
you're up. Harvey, then Bill, and then Steve.
Danny, if my brain hasn't completely been fried, you did the piece on Bobby Thompson's home run and quoted me in the article. Thank you very much. It made me famous here in my own house.
Thank you. Thank you.
I got a couple of things to say, but this Giants season, was remarkable. And to me, if I were to point to one instant, it's Mike Tauchman's catch.
Yeah.
And I don't have to explain, because everybody on this Zoom knows what I mean when I say Mike Tauchman's catch. There is Willie Mays' catch, which we refer to as the catch and throw, but Mike Tauchman's catch. Question: did you ever interview Mike Tauchman?
I didn't. That's a good question. He wasn't on the team when I joined the beat.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's
crazy.
Right. Oh,
Yeah,
that's you did.
Yeah, he has one of the most
Lawyer,
iconic moments of the season. He wasn't on the team for like most of the year.
Yeah.
All right, and if Gary, can I get another question here?
Harvey, the floor is yours.
On the issue of starting pitchers,
Yes.
If Farhan is doing his usual magic, and the Giants should hold on to Webby, Gaussman, Wood, and DeSclafani. Even though DeSclafani ran out of gas, he's a starting pitcher. If I'm not mistaken, he had two. Matter of fact, in the Gaussman catch game, he got the 1-0 win. It was a complete game. No. Gaussman was the Dodgers. Forgive me, I'm confusing. 2 weeks later, Gaussman made another catch in
Talkman.
Talkman.
Talkman made the catch in the
Talkman. Yeah,
DeSclafani
Gary,
game.
I'm tired. Listen, I still haven't gotten over that
The national.
nonsense strike three. Yeah, 2 weeks later, Talkman made a catch in Washington off of Soto. But DeSclafani got a complete game victory for that. Anyway, the Giants, I see, have 4 legitimate starters, assuming they don't sign somebody else or bring somebody up. And that's my question. What do you know, if anything, about what the Giants have down on the farm, specifically as to starting pitching?
It's a good question. DeSclafani had a really great season, and it might have even been too great. Like, a lot of his advanced numbers are almost as good as Gaussman's in terms of like batting average and balls in play and FIP and all those acronyms that mean stuff. But like, he had a great season statistically, and I think it's possible that the Giants might get priced out on him. But that's not reporting. I just do think that a lot of teams will covet him, and I don't know if the Giants will be willing to match a really high price. But I do think they're going to re-sign Gaussman. I think they're going to get 2 of the 3. Then in the farm, they don't have many options in terms of starting pitching, which is one of their areas that they're still trying to build up. They have one of the best farms in the majors. I think it's top 5. But that's an area where they're still working on. A guy like Sammy Long could, compete for the 5th starter in the rotation if things don't go their way in free agency, which is possible. I don't think they would view that as ideal. I think he's probably more of a middle relief guy, ideally, if he can throw strikes, which is a question mark. But as for starting pitching, I think there's no reason why, Farhan and Scott Harris won't try to go find some cheap, high risk, high reward guys on the open market.
Inexpensive, Danny. We don't use the word cheap.
Inexpensive. I think they like taking flyers on those guys because that's what they did. That's how they built this staff. So I think they probably view it as they can do it again if they have to.
Thanks.
Let's go to Bill Schifter.
Hey, Danny, thanks for talking to us today and everything. I enjoyed listening to you on KNBR. I live in New York and, on Alexa and everything. I basically, and as Gary said, it was an exhausting season. We felt every day was a playoff game and everything. Just getting back to the Dodgers series, though, in your opinion, what happened to the bats? Was it a week layoff? Were they just, that? Was also with the worst umpiring crew they probably had for home plate umpires, it kind of changed the Giants' strategy in working the counts and different things like that. So that all had to add up too. But what, in your opinion, what was the major reason on the hitting side why they lost the series?
So I've seen some people point to that week off, and I don't think that's the case. I don't think anyone in the clubhouse would point to that as a reason.
They were
why
tired
they
anyway,
cold.
I would assume, right?
I think they needed the week off.
They were wiped,
Yeah. So I've seen some people point to that. I don't really agree with it. But who knows? Maybe it hurt a little bit, got some guys off their rhythm. I think the biggest factor was not having belts in the lineup.
Yeah.
And their lineup during the regular season without Belt was good. They treaded water, and their first baseman that replaced him, it was like a combination of Darren Ruff and Wilmer Flores, Lamont Wade Jr., and they all were awesome. And they could do the thing where they can seek matchups. But in the playoffs, for whatever reason, they, those players specifically had a lot of trouble. It wasn't Wilmer Flores' first postseason, but it was those other two. So maybe there's something there. In general, I do think they just missed Brandon Belt, having that, power in the middle of the lineup, having that steadying influence. And, I mean, he's been one of the best hitters in baseball for the last 2 years. He's
Who would have
fifth
thought that, though? I
in
mean,
OPS. Yeah.
Oh,
he's
It's
a
crazy.
resurgent. I think they're going to re-sign him.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I do think so. Yeah. I think they're going to re-sign him. But again, like if there's a universal DH too, like there's going to be a lot of teams after him. But I do think they have mutual interest and he's going to be
He's
a
a
Giant next
great
year.
he's a great defender. I wouldn't
That's right.
relegate him to a DH. He is a
He is.
brilliant first
Right.
base.
And one
No,
last
he's
thing.
a great defender. I just
and
think
one
he has
last-
more value because teams with, a first baseman who can hit could move to a DH with Belt, if that makes any sense.
And one last thing, is Buster Posey's wife going to let him play next year? Like, I got to talk to my wife. It's like, Buster, you got to play,
Yeah. Yeah, listen, if you guys have a connection to the Posey household, you can let me know. I can try to get an answer for you. But I would say he probably does play one more year. But he was pretty wiped at the end of the year too. I mean,
Yeah.
I would be too. He ditched his workload management to play every day for like 3 straight weeks. That probably didn't help. But I think he's got one more in him.
Danny,
Yes.
before we go to Steve, I got a question for you. I try to look forward, and I don't know what next year is going to bring, but I'm also looking a couple of years down the road. Two of the guys in the current team, one has an expiring contract after next year. Evan Longoria, really, after he got hurt, did absolutely nothing. Every time he was up, we were all waiting for either a double play or a strikeout. And the other guy, Steve Duggar, to me is very similar to Mike Yastrzemski. Now, you're from Boston. Yastrzemski had a couple of really good seasons with the Giants. Again, second half, anytime he was up, he was striking out. Good base runner, good fielder. Any chance of them possibly looking to move both of those players, especially, say, Yaz to your hometown, coming back a hero, and also Longoria? Maybe the Giants can pay off half of his salary. You retire as the iconic Tampa Bay Ray that he was, and you get a third baseman. Like I said, I didn't see much difference between Duggar and Yastrzemski near the end of the year. They similarly the same player, and Yastrzemski really was just staying every time he was up. Your thoughts, and tell me if you think I'm nuts.
I'll start with
I'll
I don't
answer that
think
one,
you're
Steve.
nuts. I'll tackle the outfielders first. I do think the way that Mike was playing last year made them a little bit more redundant in a way. They're both really great fielders. Duggar's a little bit faster, but they both have really good speed. And they're both lefties who are pretty much platoon guys based on their splits. So yeah, I do think they were a little bit redundant this year, but I do think the way Yaz has hit in the past gives him like the track record and hope that he could turn it around again. I mean, he was one of the best players. He's their best player probably in 2020.
Right.
And one of the best hitters in 2019. And I do think, pitchers kind of figured him out a little bit. I think the league knew to throw him more breaking balls, through more bendy stuff, and he struggled with that. But if it's that simple, it probably isn't just that simple, just to be fair. But if it's that simple, then there should be a counter. Like he should spend, all winter working on that, and he'll be able to adjust. And he's a hardworking guy. I mean, I don't see why there wouldn't be some improvement in that area, and he can return to, a really good everyday player. And with Duggar, the team really internally views him, as a really big piece of the team going forward. He's a very streaky hitter. He kind of reminds me, you said Boston, I might have jogged my memory, but he kind of reminds me a little bit of Jackie Bradley Jr., where he'll look awesome for like 2-3 weeks, and then he won't be able to hit anything. And you can get away with that, especially if you're going to platoon him. And especially if his defense is as great as it has been. But but he's still young, and I'm sure they're hoping that to see some improvement in that area too.
Yeah, I don't see him as a regular, but like I said, Yastrzemski came up and he wasn't young to begin with. So I'm thinking, like you said, maybe they figured him out. So, and your thoughts on Longoria?
Longoria. Oh, one more thing on the outfield. Well, I'll know more about this based on how their free agency goes, because if they sign, I mean, you'll all know too, if they sign a guy like Starling Marte, like in free agency and spend a lot of money on him, then I think one of those guys is going to be expendable for sure. And that also means that Chris Bryant's not going to come back, which is another story. But Evan Longoria, I think you're on the right track there. He's been around a long time. He's a really nice guy. I like Evan a lot. He was pretty good with the media. But yeah, I mean, he was on track for an awesome season, and then he had that weird freak injury, which he never really got, back on track from, which is tough. So hopefully for his sake, he can rehab all winter and look much better. But if not, then I think he's a guy they'll probably look to move, and see whatever they can get for him.
Thank you. Steve, go ahead.
Nice guys finished last. Leo DeRosa, 1948. I'm beyond blaming the umpires at this point. Even Kapler said, we had a lot of opportunities. Two plays that stick out in my mind. One was Flores going after that foul pop, and I guess his glove hit the screen. He didn't catch it. I think Belt makes that play. And the other one was sending Flores to third in an inning where they were potentially going to have some sort of a rally. Can't do that. Just want to address the items that were mentioned before about changes. The Arizona Fall League, which is in full swing now, has initiated some changes. One, the bases are 3 inches larger in the Arizona Fall League. They're trying to induce more stolen bases. The 15-second clock is in effect for both the pitcher and the batter. And
15?
It's in the Arizona Fall League, yes. There is no shift in the Arizona Fall League. The DH is going to be on the table. Bernie Pluskoff spoke to my group this week. Bernie was a scout for the Astros for years. He's a big-time journalist. The DH is on the table. His gut feeling is, and he's pretty good baseball guy, is it'll be in effect in the National League in 2023. And the last thing, the check swing. We were growing up as kids. The deal was, did he break his wrist? There's no rule on the check swing. They're going to have to come up with something which was addressed. Thank you.
All right, let's go to Jim Fahey. James?
Hi, everyone. Hi, this is Jim or James. I'm actually in Vegas right now, but I live in San Francisco. I live at actually Candlestick Point there, right next to where the ballpark used to be. I actually met Barry out here in hi Barry. I met Barry here in Las Vegas about a month or two ago. We were here at the South Point in the sauna here, and we met, and he was telling me about your society, and he said he invited me to join him. It's great to be here. Thank you, Barry, for inviting me. I'm actually becoming a sports agent. That's one of the things I'm doing. I have a kind of a portfolio career, so I'm in the process of becoming a sports agent, recruiting athletes. I work with baseball, MLB, NFL, NBA, all of those guys. So I have a couple questions for you. Thank you for joining the group today. It's my first time here, so really excited. But I'm kind of wondering, first of all, how did this happen? Because coming into the season, nobody really expected this to be anywhere near as successful of a season as it was. I think we're looking at 107 wins. So I think the second most wins in Giants history. It's really amazing it happened, and it's almost like it's being somewhat forgotten already in some way. I mean, it happened so quickly. It was inexplicable. I was reading an article in Yahoo about how the Giants did well, and it included things like having a lot of buy-in from the players. So they really bought into the Giants' philosophy this year. Super consistent team, saying that the Giants didn't really have a losing streak the whole year, so that was really a plus for them. And then a real strong culture of respect in the clubhouse, and just winning and winning and winning. But some of the technical things this article mentions is hitting off machines that simulate some of the toughest arms instead of feasting on fat batting practice fodder, replacing perfect fungos with balls fired from machines, pitchers throwing bullpens in front of high-speed cameras that provide instant feedback and often forced adjustments. They mentioned 60-year-old coaches adjusting to video analysis instead of advanced scouting, and a culture that encourages players to take days off when they can stay healthy and well-rested. My question is, what do you think? This is somewhat of a mystery to me. It's a historic season where, and still, I think a lot of people are scratching their heads.
Yeah, I mean that's the $1 million question, really. Is how the heck did they do it? And they won 107 regular season games, which is more than they've ever won. And it was remarkable and it was inexplicable. They won, I think, what was it? Their preseason. You're a Vegas guy. Their preseason over under was 75 wins. And they won 107.
Yeah,
it's crazy. So I think a lot of the things that you mentioned had a real impact, for sure. And you'll never be able to pinpoint just one factor that led to, so much unexpected success. I do think one thing that is important that they did differently than other teams is, I actually wrote about it last week.
Okay.
But the way the team and the coaching staff addressed mental health and, handled issues like that, off the field issues, on the field issues, was different. And it definitely, had a positive impact. And Kapler pointed to that as something that definitely, led to wins. And if that's, an edge, however, simple as it might sound, where it's just like, I think you mentioned like a culture where, if you need a day off, you can take it. And if you need to spend a couple extra hours with your family because something's going on, then just do it. And, that can add up over the course of the season. I don't know if that's 5 wins, 10 wins, whatever, but something like that definitely can help. And I can share that story in the email chain, but I think that is part of the culture that they've built. I think it definitely helped this season. And I think players around the league notice it, from an agent's perspective. Why wouldn't your client want to go to a place where, you're going to get better? The coaches have a proven track record of improving players. They're going to care about you. Sometimes it's as simple as that. And, you're just going to be valued, as a human and as a player. And I think it's definitely a desirable franchise for players to want to go to. So I'm sorry if I couldn't really answer your question that directly, but
It's a great
I think
answer.
you mentioned a lot of things.
Yeah, I agree. It's really interesting. Maybe the culture you already did mention, Farhan and the coaching efforts were, kind of key, and you spoke about them and a lot of things that went on. I wonder, I guess I have a follow-up question. It's a slightly different topic, but, given that this group is dealing with it, in some way, New York and San Francisco and teams moving from one to the other. I have a question for you. It's about the A's and whether they'll leave Oakland. Recently, not too long ago, the city council voted 6-1 in favor of an amended term sheet for the debated Howard Terminal Stadium product, but the A's said the plan simply wouldn't work for them. And there are many reasons why the A's will not leave Oakland. For example, the only team to relocate in Major League Baseball in the last 50 years was the Montreal Expos. The Bay Area team would be left only with one baseball team, and some teams like the Dodgers might argue that would give the Giants an unfair advantage. Not everyone would like the A's in Las Vegas for territorial reasons. Namely, the Dodgers would likely object to the A's being in Las Vegas, and MLB could just as easily put an expansion team in Portland or Las Vegas. So why would they don't need to move the A's there. And Oakland can in fact support a team. And in fact, we're third in the league in attendance in 1990 with 2.9 million fans. So What do you think? You think A's are going to move, and what's the Giants, your sense of the Giants feeling toward that type of a thing?
Yeah, so I've read a lot about this topic because obviously it's relevant, but I am really interested in it. I think the business of sports is fascinating in general, but issues like, public financing for stadiums and versus private, and owners being greedy, I think those are issues that are really interesting. And I really hope that they stay for the sake of the Bay. And I think it's a cool rivalry that the Giants have. I do know that the Giants would prefer them to stay. There's a lot of history between the two teams, and the Bay Bridge series is really cool. I'm not sure how close the ownership groups are, but I mean, I do know that they have the history, and they would prefer to have, a second team in the Bay. And I did read that there was a 4-1 vote. I think you might have mentioned about the Howard terminal. So it sounds like that's a good sign, but in the end, it's going to come down to whether the owner is willing to spend money on it, because with the Howard terminal project plan, it sounds like they're asking for money from the city to help finance the stadium at Howard terminal. At some point, something's going to break. And I do know, like in Vegas, it's all going to be public funded. So if that's the only thing the owner cares about, then it's possible that they relocate. And that really sucks because A's fans are awesome. And the Coliseum is a dump. I went there. It sucks. Total shithole. And fans still show up and they still root for the team. And they are really knowledgeable. You totally know that, they're watching the game the whole time. They're locked in, which I think is cool. And I don't think you see that at Oracle Park all the time. So for their sake, I do hope the team stays.
Thanks.
Okay.
Let's go to the judge, and then anybody else who has not spoken yet. Now's your chance before we get some more questions.
Thanks,
Judge,
Greg.
you're up.
Thank you. First, Danny, I'm in Rochester, so it's right down the street from Syracuse. I can let you know you're heading for good weather tomorrow.
Nice.
I made the trip out to San Francisco for the first two games against the Dodgers, and it was great. I really enjoyed it, and it was nice to see 40,000 plus over at the stadium again. So I got to ask, I know Alex got in trouble for talking about attendance, but I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I just was stunned by the attendance, the poor attendance, July, August. I just, great series after great series. What a team. And I mean, we watched 7, 8, 9 years in a row of everyone, a sold out game every year, every game for 7, 8 years straight. And now we got a team like this, and you're looking around and it's 15,000 people. I don't know if it was, how much of it was COVID related. I know they've had some traffic problems. I mean, I think, is it Norm that it lives in San Francisco right now? I mean, maybe you can chime in, but I'm curious as to where was everybody?
Yeah, it was shocking to see. Really, like, I think like the last week of the season, it was a Tuesday like afternoon game, to be fair, but like they're going for like their 103rd win, and it was like half full. I'm just like, what's going on? It was
Community
bizarre.
Metro. That's what was going on. Yeah, it was running till 9 o'clock.
He's right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I know, I know there's construction around there. I saw that. I know the parking, I saw $100 lots 2 miles from the stadium. So I knew there were some transportation issues, but still, my goodness, I was really disappointed in that. So any insight as to, I'm hoping next year we should get back to sell out every game. That's where
You will. Transportation.
Yeah, I think
It's a mass
they will.
transportation ballpark. It's not a car ballpark.
Right.
And that was the issue. Muni Metro didn't go to the neighborhoods after 9 o'clock. My ticket, the guy that bought my license, had to leave the game at 9 o'clock, or else it would take him 2.5 hours to get home to the Sunset District.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue that wasn't mentioned is that people weren't really working downtown. Everybody was working from home, right? And I think a lot of people go from work to the game, and they go with their work, and they have boxes and everything. So I think that's a factor too. And I do think people care a lot about COVID as well. But I was still disappointed. Like there are issues that were resolvable, and there were issues that you know, people could have overcame them to go to these crazy historic games for sure. And you saw them do that for all the playoff games.
Yeah,
Like, it was
great.
possible.
It was a great atmosphere,
So,
and that was really nice to see. And one baseball question. I'm a little surprised and disappointed to hear Farhan's comments about Chris Bryant. I thought he'd be a priority, and it now seems like it's not likely to happen.
yeah,
Or
I don't
certainly
think
not a
it's going
priority.
to happen.
You
I
don't think
think
it's going to happen?
I think you guys will be able to see Chris Bryant pretty easily if you go to Citi Field next year.
No.
But
I start my job as the general manager next week of the Mets. So
do you guys want them to re-sign Chris Bryant?
Yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
yes,
Absolutely.
Good
Not
point.
if it's a reasonable contract, yeah, I mean, but I don't think it's gonna be. Yeah, the
What
Mets,
is a
so-
reasonable contract?
If you look at the style they played this year, where they were moving people around left and right, he's the one guy that fits in everywhere and
Right.
really gives Kepler a lot of flexibility and makes Kepler
Yeah.
look like a better manager. I mean, he's the perfect type of player. I'm not sure that Marte fits that bill, even though he might be a better hitter.
Plus,
He's
he
a
was
good
a
athlete,
Giants
too.
fan. He loves the
I-
Giants too. You'd think he would
Yeah.
sign,
Yeah. No, I definitely wouldn't rule it out. I think it's possible because he definitely did like the Giants. He liked San Francisco. He liked the team and the culture that we mentioned. As for flexibility, I think he's more flexible on paper than in practice. He
I
kind
like
of-
it there.
Yeah, no, he plays every position, but I don't think he plays any position like above average.
Yeah, he's not a Gold Glover or anything. No,
No,
Yeah,
couldn't
he
handle
really
right
struggled
field there.
in
Yeah.
right
Right
field. He
field,
was
yeah.
right field
shaky.
was That
That was
In
bad.
third base, he wasn't great, and that's like his natural position.
Yeah.
I think they're not going to put him at center because they have those two options that we mentioned. And at that point, then he's just a left fielder, like is a good hitter. And he's a good left fielder.
Which they won the World Series with Pat Burrell in left field. So
Yeah, I also think he might be, if they somehow don't get Brandon Bell, I think he could be a first baseman.
First baseman.
And you saw him do that a little bit in the playoffs. And I think that's probably a better fit for him than, right field in Oracle Park, which is a pretty tough right field. As for why I don't think he's going to be a Giant next year, it's mostly just because I think he's a Boris client.
oh yeah,
And
top dollar.
not even top dollar, but more the fact that
Late.
Boris waits, he waits and waits and waits for everyone else to sign and then asks for the most money. I don't really think the Giants are in the market of waiting, all winter. But we'll see. I think it's, like I said, it's possible. And it's also possible that there's no free agents until whatever, like next June, if there's a huge, lockout. Like, I think that's possible too. It would definitely suck, but there could definitely be a strike. I don't know.
And I
Danny,
just gotta make one
Danny,
other
do you
comment.
have, you have time for more questions, Dan?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have like 5 more minutes if that's
Okay.
all right.
Hey, Gary, I just want to add the judge, where did you sit for the 2 games? Because we were there.
310.
Okay.
Section
And where'd you
310.
stay? In downtown or?
Yeah, right down the street from the stadium, right over on King Street.
All right, Dave Littman, you're up.
Yeah, I just want to ask, I got here a little late, so this may have been asked. Do you see the Giants doing more to honor their New York heritage than they've already done? Because, I don't think, I really think they could do more. Thatcher, Christy Mathewson would not be out of place.
Yeah, no, I think the Giants are a franchise that definitely is aware of the history, and I think they generally care about it. I do agree that they can do more to recognize the history of New York, but it's tricky. I don't think the Giants fans now, like, you guys are definitely in the minority of Giants fans who also really care a lot about the New York Giants. I can just tell that, anecdotally speaking, when I wrote the Bobby Thompson story, like, a lot of people didn't even know that story, which, I mean, some of that is generational. It happened a long time ago, to be fair, but I mean, a lot of people that are San Francisco Giants fans, even diehard fans, like, weren't aware of the Bobby Thompson home run. So the team could do a better job of telling that story and, hundreds of other stories that, happened in New York for sure.
I wore my Johnny Antonelli jersey there, and not a single soul had a clue who Johnny was. 10 years ago, if I wore that, I'd always have a couple people come up and say, "Hey, I saw him in the Polo Grounds," or something like that. But now you wear that jersey, they think it's my name. But yeah.
Danny, when the Giants played their last game in New York, there's a gentleman here who was on the field and the bat boy of the Giants. Ed, you want to say hello to Danny?
Yeah, hi, Danny. You mean to tell me that the people in San Francisco don't know who the last New York Bat Boy was?
I know who the last New York Bat Boy was.
Come on, what's up with that? What's up with that? Yeah, I was. Yeah, the Pittsburgh Pirates beat us, and we had to run across the field. New York was really, Polo Grounds was unique because of where the clubhouse was, and that's historical of things that happened because of that clubhouse, like the Stein stealing and all that from the windows. So yeah, I was there, 16 years old, and I was in the dugout, and Doc Bowman was my supervisor. He was the trainer, and he said, "Okay, now grab your hat, and we're gonna run because the first thing you're gonna do is try to grab your hat." So we had to run across the whole field from the dugout up the steps. And you've seen pictures with Bobby Thompson running this way. And I can't remember whether it was ahead of him or back of him, but that's a famous photograph. And you tell me that people in San Francisco have never heard the shot around the world. What universe?
Of course they have.
What universe?
Hopefully they read my story.
That's one of the greatest things in sports. What sport are they in?
They show it on the scoreboard all the time.
Yeah.
And Russ Hodges called. Of course they know.
They probably haven't heard of Babe Ruth either. I mean, what's up with that? I don't get it.
All right, Harvey Weinberg, you got the last question for the evening.
Well, two quick comments and one quick comment and a question. First of all, Gary, you said Longo didn't do anything. I seem to recall a 430 some odd foot home run in that 1-0 game.
Oh, forget it.
That counts, Gary.
That counts.
He's right.
No,
That counts.
No, Harvey, 1000% correct. I'm just, again, you got to start getting young sometime.
Listen, Gary, I don't want to piss you off. I don't want to get banned from the group, but I'm telling you, that home run counts. And Danny, I have one quick question for you. Let me see if you can do this in 30 seconds. Name all the Giants coaches this year. I'm only kidding, Danny. I'm only kidding.
Danny,
Thanks,
Who do
Gary.
you think is going to be the next third base coach?
That's
They're
a
gonna
good
bring back Flannery, probably.
Oh, bring back.
Flannery.
He's ill, isn't he? Doesn't he have an ill?
I think, again, I don't really have any reporting per se, but I was coincidentally on the same flight as Wotus coming back as Ron. He was going back to see his family. So that's why I thought about it. But I think it's possible that we see Antoine, who was at first, Antoine Richardson, go over to third. And it's possible that Alyssa is at first, which I think would be really cool.
Danny, do you know that Antoine scored the run that he was playing for the Yankees? That was Derek Jeter's last hit.
Really? I did not know that.
Derek, that's correct.
Huh.
Very good, Harvey. That's
Hey,
a good
can I
one.
interrupt for some news off of Twitter? They're saying that the Padres have hired Bob Melvin as their next manager. taking
Wow.
the A's.
Wow.
Coaches. I knew that.
Well,
I think that's a
listen,
great hire.
gentlemen, we owe Danny really a gratitude because Danny is also on vacation. Danny, we can't thank you enough. We hope.
Terrific, Danny.
We hope
Yeah,
you
this was
come
great.
aboard.
Thanks, Danny. Been
We
a
hope
real
you come
pleasure.
aboard just as a guest, like everybody else here. You're always welcome. But thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your vacation, and thanks so much for spending time with us. You guys all
Thanks
know
a lot,
where to
guys.
find him. He's the KNBR.com reporter. Go on his Twitter account, and he writes great articles for not only the Giants but the Warriors, and I think the 49ers also. Or
Mostly Warriors.
Mostly Warriors. So let's give it up for Danny.
Okay. Thank you,
Thanks a lot,
Danny.
guys. I
Danny, have a
appreciate it.
great night. Thanks so much.